So in this lesson, we're going to add authentication to our application. Before we can do that, we need to go on Firebase console, here under Authentication and Sign-in methods. And here are the list of the providers that we can use from Firebase. If you want to enable Facebook or Twitter, you need to create a developer account with them. And then they're going to give you the API key and a secret key that you can use. And also, they're going to ask you what URL you want to redirect after. And this is the one that you use on their website. And you just need to click Enable, Add, and Save. We're going to do the Google because it doesn't need any API keys, because Firebase belongs to Google, of course. So you just click Enable, then Save. Now, after that's done, we can continue, and let's go back to our code. And in our auth service, I'm just going to clean up. So let's import Firebase. And you also need to import the authentication from our Firebase configuration file, this one. So import, let's go one up, and then Firebase. Here we're going to create a Google that will log in the user with Google. We can also add some more, Twitter. And here we're going to create a function that will use these providers and do the login for us. This one's going to be a private function. And let's call it provider handler. You can call it whatever you like. It will take a provider. And this too is going to be a public function because you're going to use it from outside the service. Now for each of these functions, we need to create a provider. And this is going to return a Firebase auth, a Google auth provider. Now we can just return this .provider handler and pass that provider. I'm going to do the same for the Twitter. And here I'm just going to change for Twitter auth provider. Now we're going to get that provider information and we're going to return the authentication. Auth. This auth is the one that we imported from Firebase. And here we can call it, either we can do a login with a pop-up or a redirect. There used to be some problems with the redirect when you're doing PWA, something between the browser and how to open the app. I don't know if that's still a case, but let's use the pop-up. I've tried this one before and it looks quite nice because it opens a pop-up within your app and it's really nice. So that's it. We have our Twitter. Here you can add Facebook and it will be the same. You just create your provider with Facebook provider or whatever, or whichever you want to use. And you pass to this function and it's going to do the same thing. So now we need to call these functions from somewhere in our components. So let's create a page for our authentication. I'm going to use the Stencil tools to create a new component. I'll call it page auth. So here we need to import our service. To go one more up, then service, auth service. So here we are importing this variable, not the class itself, because this is the instance that we created of auth service. Now let's remove this. I'm going to create an array of divs so we can add the header. So navbar. Remember we added a title to it. So authentication. And here I'm going to add an Ion content and an Ion button. Login with Google. So to use this Google login, we can just do onClick. And here we're going to pass an anonymous function that will call the auth service Google. So let's go and check this in the browser. I'm gonna start my server. I'm getting the 0 because I still have the data from the previous lesson in here. So I'm just gonna remove it. And I can delete this. Now let's go to the browser. Here my home page. Let's just go to the Auth page. We need to create a router for that. So let's open our app.tsx and add that router. So here just below the About page, I'm gonna add an IO route with a URL. This you can change, you can add any routes you want and call the component. Now if you try again, we have our authentication page and it also has the menu. Now if you click login, it's gonna give you the options if you already have a user logged in. So if you go on the application, dev tools, and here on IndexedDB, that's where Firebase keeps all its data. And then local storage DB and then local storage. And here is the Firebase user object that was created. And here on the authentication, users, we have our user in here and the provider that he used to create the account. So we successfully logged in with Firebase and created a user account. Let's just add some styling here. I would like this button to center here in the middle. Let's see how we can do that. So back in our code, I'm just going to create a layout in here and I'm going to use the Ion grid to do that. The Ion grid gives you a lot of easy to use styling that you can just place things around in your page and create a really nice layout. So we're gonna use Ion grid. And the Ion grid has rows and columns. We're gonna have only one row and one column. If you add more columns, it's gonna share that column within this row. The row being horizontal and the column vertical. Now we're gonna move this button inside. Just like that. If you take a look, nothing changed. He added some paddings over here, but nothing changed. So let's add some CSS so we can style it a bit more. Now in our Auth page SCSS, just gonna remove this. And here I'm gonna add a grid, because you're gonna target that grid that you added to the template, and the Ion row. So when I'm dealing with grids or a layout, I like to add a color so I get to see what I'm changing. So I'm just gonna add this too, and let's take a look. There we go, we have our grid that is on the red over there, and the row is the green. It's gonna close this dev tool. So let's add some height. I want the grid to be 100% of the content after the header. So I'll add a height of 100%, and I'll also add the 100% height to the row. Now let's center the button. First we use text align to horizontally center it, and then we can use align item to the center. This red border that you see here is because the Ion grid comes with default padding to it, so we can just remove that with padding 0 and it will disappear. This text align and align items, if you take a look at the Ionic documentation, and if you go here on guides and responsive grid, here they show you how to use it and what can you do with it. So there are grid size that you can set it up. We're gonna see that later. How to set size to the columns, like having one small, one bigger. Now this is what we used over there, align items. If you go back to our code, and add this to our row, and I can remove this one here, align items center. That will be exactly the same as this one. They just give us some way of doing that inside the template. So let's take a look. We still have the same layout. Same goes for the align text center. Here we can, this is how to align vertical. And for the text should be on the CSS utilities. You can use text start, end, and that's the one we used. So if you take a look, I'm just gonna comment it out, this one, and I'm going to add the text start, end, and that's the one we use, center. Same goes for this one. You can add end or start. Because you are already using CSS to change some stuff in the Ion row, I'd rather leave it in here altogether so I don't pollute the template. But this is a really nice way for you to, if you just want a quick styling, just to use these little helpers that Ionic give us. We're gonna learn a bit more about styling with these helper methods later on in the course. So back to our application, I'm just gonna remove these background colors that we don't need anymore. And there we have it. For the bottom, we also have some other properties that we can set to make it look nicer. If you go to the components and Ionic button, Ion button, so we have a expand. Let's add this expand block in there. So this one's going to take up all the space of our row div. If set to 70%, it will be 70%. We can also add the fill, like for outline or just a transparent one. We can make it small. And as in most components, you can also change the color of it. If you want to do any more styling for it, if you scroll down, there are some properties that you can set. These ones you need to set inside the CSS file. So you just do Ion button, and you need to add those dash because that's a custom property, custom styling. So you can just do like that. Red, and then the color is red in there. So if you want to use any of these custom properties, you need to see which one is available. Not all properties are available for each component, but you need to use this dash dash. Anyways, let's just remove this, and in the next lesson we're gonna continue with authentication.